What's up? Fade here doing a review on The Incredible Hulk 2008, starring Edward Norton as Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, Thunderbolt Ross, played by William Hurt, and Liv Tyler, playing Betty Ross. So, let's get into this movie. This movie's mostly forgotten by people. That most don't even realize it's connected to the MCU, but it is. From the opening credits, we get all kinds of references and ties to the rest of the MCU, plus the origin and aftermath of Bruce Banner's accident that makes him the Incredible Hulk. So the experiment reflects the live action TV intro. Betty and General are injured. Bruce is chased from the hospital by her father, and the pursuit begins. Banner goes on the run. General Ross pursues, acquiring Stark Tech. We're shown files that reference Nick Fury, Shield, and Rick Jones, Hulk's sidekick from the comics. But the way the intro is done, that shows Hulk's origin, is geniusly handled. It cuts down the time frame that most of these superhero movies take up to explain the origin. This one just expertly handles it in no time and makes all kinds of references to the comics and all kinds of connections to the other movies in a matter of minutes. The movie picks up interestingly enough, and the region where the 2003 Ang Lee movie, I believe it was 2003, where the Ang Lee Hulk movie left off at in Brazil. Banner lives a mostly solitude life, learning foreign languages, practicing meditation, control over his emotions, wearing a watch to observe his heart rate, and that kind of elevates the tension later on. So he works out a bottling plant and accidentally cuts his hand. Blood gets in one of the bottles, and later Stan Lee makes his cameo, drinking one of those soda bottles. Whatever happened got back to General Ross. He brings a specialist soldier, assembles SWAT, and surrounds Banner's location, and the tense pursuit begins. The early action scene, Hulk is shrouded in darkness, terrorizing his pursuers in a monster movie fashion, and he escapes. That fight, that action scene, that action sequence stands apart from the rest in the movie. Each action sequence in this movie is very different from the last. Anyways, Emil Bronsky, played by Tim Roth, a specialist soldier, brought in, wants another crack at Banner, fascinated by the raw power of the Hulk. With his consent, he provides General Thunderbolt Ross provides an off-color version of the super soldier serum that birthed Captain America. So that's another MCU connection. Bruce cautiously tries to reconnect with Betty Ross, only to learn there's a new man in her life, her boyfriend Samson. Dr. Samson, another person that becomes a superhero in the comics from gamma radiation. We also get a cameo from Lou Ferrigno. Sorry. The actor that played Hulk on the TV show is seen here as a security guard. Anyways, Banner crashes at a friend's, and the place it's called Stanley's Pizza, which is an Easter egg. That Betty catches a glimpse of him there and pursues, playing the old Walk Away or Hitchhiking theme song from the old Hulk TV show. Another reference. Betty arrives and picks up Bruce out of the rain. They reunite. You can feel the tension and longing for each other between these two. Uh, especially as he stays for the night with her. But he has intent to disappear in the morning again, and Betty knows that, and she wants to take him personally. So the next day, Betty and Banner say their goodbyes at the campus. Banner is pursued before he can leave town. What unfolds is a large action scene between the soldiers and Hulk and Agent Bronsky arrogantly trying to take on the Hulk now that he has the super soldier formula. But we also see the acquisition that occurred in the opening credits, where General Thunderbolt Ross was ordering Stark Tech. We see that come into play in this action sequence, and it almost brings down the Hulk. Hulk cripples Bronski's body, though, and sends the rest of the soldiers into full retreat. That before he does, he saves Betty from a near death, nearly getting killed. He escapes with Betty, and that Hulk is very angry. It's a very sweet but tense scene of Hulk and Betty sitting in a cave after their escape. Later on, they get a room. Betty throws Bruce some purple pants, a reference to Hulk's classic comic book attire. Anyways, with the data kept from the Hulk experiment, the whole reason that Bruce was going to Betty, that the experiment data was kept by Betty. Together, they track down Mr. Blue, someone Banner has been communicating with through an encrypted line as Mr. Green, trying to cure the Hulk problem. See, the news channel that reports on the Hulk versus military fight comes up repeatedly throughout the following MCU movies. Bruce and Betty almost get on. He can't, though, without Hulk coming out. And that kind of makes a tragic X-Men's roguelike romance. I thought that was pretty good. Bronski heals up and is back on his feet, despite the fact nobody expected that. There's just some problems with it, too, that he keeps to himself that makes him desperate later on. When Betty and Bruce finally meet Mr. Blue in the third act, only after Hulk is experimented on and may be gone for good, it becomes apparent that the Doctor is a mad scientist. Though a genius, there are no links he won't go to for science. The final climax results in Agent Broski and Thunderbolt Ross capturing Banner. However, Broski has the mad scientist help him under the threat of his life and becomes Abomination, while the scientist is hinted at as becoming one of Hulk's greatest supervillains, the Leader, because a canister leaks out on his open wound on his forehead, and it does this odd bulging thing. Anyways, a big fight goes down between Abomination and Hulk, a huge long action scene. It's a little clunky, but it's also pretty good. Shows that Abomination has some sense of his intelligence, retains some of that, like he does in the comics. However, it's a little uneven because he does go on just a rampaging massacre. But that could just be who the guy is. Just power hungry and going batshit crazy with the power. But this brought some depth to General Thunderbolt Ross. The fact that he was willing to let the Hulk go. Of course, it is to clean up his own mess, since he made the Abomination by giving Bronski that diluted version of the super soldier serum. But he lets the Hulk go to try to take down Bronski. And Hulk ends up escaping after all that's said and done. The big battle, the big showdown. Very lengthy fight scene. Full of all kinds of destruction. A lot of people complain about the CGI, but I'm never big on complaining about the CGI as long as the story's good. The highlights of this movie, though, are multiple villains with arcs. Sure, they want the power of Hulk, but all their motivations for that power are strikingly different. I mean, it's pretty common that MCU movies don't have the greatest villains, but these arcs are pretty fleshed out for these villains. and their motivations are strikingly different for the power they want. And another highlight is the romance between Betty and Bruce are better than most MCU romances. I think the best MCU romance is probably Tony and Pepper, and following that, uh, Steve and Peggy. But this romance is pretty good, pretty strong. It's not overplayed, it's not underplayed, it's just the right amount. The movie also has barely any jokes, unlike the majority of the MCU movies that hit you over the head again, constantly, with joke after joke, especially the later MCU movies. This movie maintains a serious tone, and it's filled to the brim with comic book references and characters. It really felt like they were setting up a very strong standalone Hulk trilogy with all these characters. The final scene consists of Thunderbolt Ross and Tony Stark talking in a bar about building a team. And this movie was, I'd say this movie is pretty strong. It's surprising that it's forgotten, that there is nothing that truly stands out in this movie that makes it truly great, but there's nothing that makes it bad. Like Iron Man 3, I consider that just bad movie. This movie though, Edward Norton wrote a good portion of the script from what I understand. Uh that this would be he would not go on to be play Hulk anymore. There were behind the scenes conflicts, and it's really unsure what happened to this day. But for this movie, I'm gonna give an 8 out of 10. It's a really good, strong movie. It's a damn shame that they never brought back the leader or Abomination or Dr. Sampson or Betty Ross, because later on they try to give Hulk a romance arc that it just feels very, very wrong. Especially if we're supposed to believe, this is tied to the rest of the MCU universe. Can't really believe that Hulk shouldn't want anybody else but Betty. And that romance was just terrible. That attempt at romance was just terrible that takes place later in the Avengers Age of Ultron movie. But anyways, I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. Or I'm tempted to give it a 9 out of 10. But I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It is that good. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Check out my GoFundMe link below. And stay awesome.